Strange Studies of Strange Stories.
This, then, is the story of our liberation. Suck air and grab clusters. Hi-ho, here is the tale. August was the month. A Tuesday in August. These words are meaningless now, so far have we progressed, but many things known and discussed by our primitive ancestors, our unliberated, unreconstructed forefathers, are devoid of sense to our free minds. Still, the tale must be told, with all of its incredible place names and vanished points of reference. Why must it be told? Have any of you a better thing to do? We have had water and weeds and lie in a valley of gusts. So rest, relax, and listen, and suck air. Suck air. On a Tuesday in August, the ship appeared in the sky over France in a part of the world then known as Europe.
Welcome, folks, to Strange Studies of Strange Stories. It's Monster May!
I'm a monster!
And this month, we're going monster, alien style, with William Tenn's short story, Liberation of Earth. I'm Chris Lackey.
And I'm Chad Pfeiffer. Hey-ho! Suck air and grab clusters, folks. Because for the next half hour or so, we're going to be talking about a classic science fiction tale that is both horrifying and hilarious.
Are aliens monsters? Well, some are, and I think that these aliens are pretty terrible.
They are monstrous on the outside, if we define that as appearing outside of known earthly forms. And they are monstrous on the inside, if we define that as they're a bunch of assholes. This month, let me tell you something. You and I both read a lot of monster stories.
Boy, did we.
Leading up to this month. I wanted to be prepared, so I got through a bunch of them. There were a lot of good ones, but often they followed a formula. The protagonist thinks something weird is happening, there are a bunch of words, and then there's a monster. And it looks weird, but then it just does something really mean, and then it's over.
There you go.
You ask if aliens are monsters. I was asking, are these monsters monsters? You know, we read a Carl Edward Wagner story, Where the Summer Ends, which was really well written and good, about invasive vines growing around a blighted urban area. But the big revelation was that there are these little green monster men hiding in there who get you. I was just wondering, are these even monsters any more than a tiger or a shark is a monster? They're just part of the environment.
Yeah.
They're kind of just doing what little green men do. So we try to go with stories where the monsters are more than just a scary face.
Yes.
And just to tee up a macro topic for the month, what does make a monster a monster?
I will accept that macro topic. But what I can't accept is that we have yet to introduce our reader.
I'm so embarrassed. Whose was that delightful voice?
Why, that was George Woodruff, backed by popular demand.
And I'm so glad to hear him. George is, of course, the man behind Full Throttle Sound. Whether your project requires narration, dubbing, or even a voice for your corporate phone directory, quality audio matters. Full Throttle Sound and Mr. Woodruff are there to get it done for you. We will link out in the show notes. Thank you, George. I'm so glad to have him back.
Now, we've never covered the author William Tenn, but we have covered Tennessee Williams before, which can be a little confusing.
That's an easy thing to mix up, and I'm sure at some point, like a sweet grandmother gave her precocious grandson a William Tenn book for Christmas. That's the one you like, right? No, Grandma! It's Tennessee Williams I like. I asked for Cat on a Hot Tin Roof. The Glass Menagerie? You stupid. Wait, this William Tenn book looks pretty good, actually. I'm sorry, Grandma. I'm sorry I got so upset. I shouldn't have called you that, Grandma. I'm 7. I shouldn't be using language like that. Let's learn about William Tenn together.
William Tenn, born Philip Class in 1920 in London, but then he moved to New York City when he was 2 years old and grew up in Brooklyn. And of course, he moved with his family. They didn't just put the kid on a boat by himself.
Well, I'll just have to believe you on that one.
He served the U.S. during World War II as a combat engineer in Europe and worked at Bell Labs as a technical editor with the Air Force Radar and Radio Laboratory. After the war, he got married and moved to State College, Pennsylvania, where he taught comparative literature at Penn State. After he retired, he moved to my one-time stomping ground, Pittsburgh, PA. He published most of his nonfiction work under his real name, Philip Klass, and his fiction work under the name William Tenn. He wrote 2 novels and 60 short stories.
He became known in the 50s as the science fiction field's reigning humorist. He would use a satirical voice to tell these high-concept stories. Theodore Sturgeon had this to say about Tenn. It would be too wide a generalization to say that every sci-fi satire, every science fiction comedy, and every attempt at witty and biting criticism found in the field is a poor and usually cheap imitation of what this man has been doing since the 1940s. His incredibly involved and complex mind can at times produce constructive comments so pointed and astute that the fortunate recipient is permanently improved by it.
Wow.
High praise.
Yeah. Unfortunately, Tenn, or Philip Klass, died of heart failure in 2010. This story was first published in the May 1953 issue of Future Science Fiction.
Well, let's get into it.
The story begins in a strange way. We have an unnamed narrator telling us the history of man from a future time, with strange phrasing like, suck air and grab clusters. Hey-ho, here is the tale. The narrator also says that humanity has progressed since our day. Humans no longer need dates or calendars, that primitive stuff. The narrator refers to us as their primitive ancestors. So they must really be evolved, perhaps with great wisdom and awesome technology, right?
Right? I had some idea what the story was actually about before I read it. It was discussed in an article that straight up said, these are people who have been reduced to impoverished, savage conditions. They eat grass and drink water out of puddles, but they believe they've been liberated in some way. So I was getting the humor. Grab clusters, meaning grab some handfuls of grass to chew on. And it says suck air instead of breathe.
Yeah.
Because the planet's been poisoned and clean air is in short supply. The line that really made me laugh from that opening was, still the tale must be told with all of its incredible place names and vanished points of reference. Why must it be told? Have any of you a better thing to do? Life is so crappy, you might as well. Yes, it's important to tell this tale, but I'm also just passing the time.
The narrator's tale begins long ago with an alien vessel arriving on Earth and hovering over France. It's 5 miles long, silver, and shaped like a cigar.
Big space phallus.
Yes. People are obviously freaked out by this. The United Nations convenes and discusses its next steps. Military planes are sent out, and journalists are speculating on the whole situation. Finally, the aliens emerge.
A tremendous slab snapped up in the middle of the ship, and the first of the aliens stepped out in the complex tripodal gait that all humans were shortly to know and love so well. He wore a metallic garment to protect him from the effects of our atmospheric peculiarities, a garment of the opaque, loosely folded type that these, the first of our liberators, wore throughout their stay on Earth.
Very alien aliens. They say they've got 3 legs and 4 arms at some point. They go into a little bit more detail about them.
In some ways, though, very predictable aliens, at least as we've seen them in pulp stories prior to this. Mm-hmm. And I think that's on purpose. I think the story is not only satirizing humanity, but also the genre a bit.
These aliens come out and speak in a language that nobody understands. They stand there for a bit, waiting for some intelligible reply. They don't get any, and so they go back into the ship. The narrator says, this was humanity's first liberation. Well, the first of our first liberations.
Right away, the reader wonders, what did you need to be liberated from? I think I live in this world. Either there's some facts we don't know, or humanity maybe just got talked into something.
People speculate on what the alien might have said, because nobody knows. Was it a demand for surrender? Was it a trade offer? Just a greeting? After some discussion, the world leaders decide to speak to them in English, French, and Russian, asking what the aliens want, but again, they don't understand. Fortunately, a linguist from India recognizes part of the language, saying that it sounds very similar to an obscure Bengali dialect. It seems that the aliens visited Earth thousands of years ago, and the Bengalis were the most advanced civilization at the time.
I really liked this because it makes clear that the aliens just took for granted that people would still be speaking that language.
Yeah.
It shows a complete lack of interest in Earth, its developing culture, its people, how they changed and migrated. Like, this alien at this point has come out and made the exact same speech to the humans over and over and over again in that old language and never even tried a different tactic, didn't play with semaphore or anything like that. But the fact that the aliens had visited long ago is something that they wouldn't actually learn until later.
Right.
The narrator says, I move ahead of my tale as one who would munch on the succulent roots before the drier stem. Let me rest and suck air for a moment. Hey-ho! Truly, those were tremendous experiences for our kind.
The narrator says that he is telling this tale as he heard it from his father, who got it from his father before him, and so on. It's an oral tradition, so no written word in the future?
Nothing but weeds and puddles of water and air you got to pull at like you're siphoning gas. But at least they have freedom.
Yes.
Back to the story. Now that they have this linguistic connection, they can start to create a dictionary so that they can communicate with the aliens.
They find a scholar who's been working on a paper for 18 years. He's an expert on this ancient Bengali dialect who has rushed to France to translate the alien speech and create a vocabulary they can use to communicate. When he arrives, he sees that more aliens have emerged from the ship and they're constructing these large machines bigger than any building in France.
What? Have any of these people read War of the Worlds? This is like by the book. Literally.
People are also freaking out because anyone who touches one of these machines that the aliens are building just vanishes. Vaporized, gone.
Right.
The leaders of Earth are worried. The scholar finally is able to crack the language and we get an explanation. The aliens are called the Dendi. They are part of an advanced galactic civilization. Humanity was deemed too primitive to be involved and they ordered the other races not to interfere with us. So a kind of prime directive, like in Star Trek. Occasionally, secret scientific studies were done, but that's it.
I mean, the prime directive says you don't interfere with anybody's culture, right? Or their practices.
Unless they're part of the Galactic Federation, yes.
But here, I think it's not necessarily that they don't want to interfere. It's just that we've been considered too primitive to join this Galactic Federation. We haven't developed enough. One might even call the Earth, from their point of view, third world. That term, for what people might also call developing countries, originates from the idea that there's the Western world of the democracies, the first world, and then the Soviet sphere of influence, the second world. And then third world countries are the ones that aren't aligned with either of those, or it shifts back and forth. These are poorer, colonized countries. It's interesting that our real language for this in media is already like interplanetary. It mirrors this actual story a little bit.
The Galactic Federation is at war with a worm-like race called the Troxt. The Troxt are brutal and merciless and want to make themselves the new rulers of the galaxy. The Federation has appointed the Dendi to protect Earth from the coming Troxt threat.
So they're not contacting us now because they think we're evolved equals, but because they parentally want to protect us from a race of horrible, worm-like organisms known as the Troxt, almost as advanced technologically as they were retarded in moral development. They had seized control of several key suns with their attendant planetary systems, and after a calculated decimation of the races thus captured, had announced their intention of punishing with a merciless extinction all species unable to appreciate from these object lessons the value of unconditional surrender. In despair, the Galactic Federation had turned to the Dendi, one of the oldest, most selfless, and yet most powerful of races in civilized space, and commissioned them as the military arm of the Federation to hunt down the Troxt. Well, thank goodness we're being protected by the good guys.
Yeah. This war has been going on for centuries, has left much destruction, and has stalled into a stalemate. The Troxt are looking to expand to Proxima Centauri, and Earth is the best place to stop their encroachment. Earth is not of interest for its people or its resources, just its location.
Right. Not for its people, certainly. I like that shifting definition of why they've come. They're here to protect us from the threat. And, well, also this is a good location for a military base that you happen to live in. But they're good guys about it. The Dendi apologize profusely for intruding on our development, an intrusion which might cost us dear in our delicate developmental state. But, as they explained, before their arrival we had in effect become, all unknowingly, a satrapy of the awful Troxt. We could now consider ourselves liberated.
And this isn't just a skirmish. No, the Dendi tell them that this is a fight for all civilization itself against an enemy so horrible, so obscene in its nature, and so utterly filthy in its practices that it was unworthy of the label of intelligent life. They ask humanity to join them, and with only some hesitation, the world leaders agree.
We will not stand aloof. We will help you destroy this menace to the very fabric of civilization. Just tell us what you want us to do. Well, nothing in particular, the aliens replied with some embarrassment. Possibly in a little while there might be something, few things in fact, which could be useful, but for the moment, if the humans could just concentrate on not getting in their way while they service their gun mounts, they'd be really grateful for that.
So the humans just end up setting up a perimeter around the Dendi equipment 2 miles away, giving them some space, and just not letting other humans go into that space. So
they just regulate themselves.
Exactly. The humans are so on board with this. A Harvard professor of government says, "Let us forget our individual egos and collective conceits. Let us subordinate everything to the end that the freedom of the solar system in general and Earth in particular must and shall be preserved." I'm getting flashes of V here.
Yeah, well, most people say, as does the author, that this story is really about the Korean War. My point of view, and it sounds like you agree, is that William Tenn was trying to write the 80s TV miniseries V and failing. We'll revisit this at the end. No, it reminded me of that as well, because at first we see them as our friends, right?
Yes. Even though the Earth is really on Team Dendi, they're not actually sure what the Dendi are doing.
No.
Then the Dendi give a message to evacuate Washington. The message isn't given with any follow-up, and they don't really answer questions, so the U.S. is basically just trying to figure out if they mean Washington, D.C. or Washington State.
Again, the Dendi are really lazy occupiers who are communicating with the local populace really badly, and that does not remind me of the country I live in at all.
The U.S. capital is then moved to the base of the Rocky Mountains, including some of those famous structures in Washington, D.C. After it's all done, turns out the Dendi just wanted to build a recreation hall for their troops. To further bruise the ego of humanity, it turns out that the Dendi are just actually a small squad. There aren't really many of them on Earth, and their highest ranked officer is only the equivalent of a buck sergeant. And I didn't know what a buck sergeant was. A buck sergeant is an informal term for a newly promoted sergeant, the lowest rank of the non-commissioned officer tier.
Yeah, like they just got the job. They thought they were dealing with the emperor, but they've been talking to Imperial Officer number 3.
I don't even think they were talking to an Imperial officer, because those guys are officers, and a sergeant is a non-commissioned officer. So I think you're thinking like maybe a stormtrooper with one of those shoulder things.
That's what it is. It's a stormtrooper with one of those shoulder things. Doesn't even have a biography on Wikipedia. Star Wars fans didn't care enough to make up a name, home planet, and simple biography for the stormtrooper.
Now, one thing that humanity benefits from, and I'm not sure if benefit's the right word, but the Dendi metal humans call Lendi. It seems to be just leftovers from their construction, but it's not harmful. Like the other stuff, people disappear when they touch it. But this stuff has got the property where it transforms into any metal it touches, including radioactive materials.
You could touch it to a gold chain and it would become gold.
That's right.
That would be big news in the alchemy circles that I run in,
Finally, it's been cracked.
Yeah.
Lendi quickly becomes a hot commodity. Humans gather around the Dendi zones and chant, "Any Lendi, Dendi?"
The Dendi themselves seem to get some unexplainable pleasure out of scattering tiny pieces of Lendi to the scrabbling multitude. Yeesh. People are not entirely ignorant about how far they've fallen. It says mankind almost began to hope for the attack to come, so that it would be relieved of the festering consideration of its own patent inferiorities.
And their wishes come true in September. The Trox show up and attack in 3 black cylindrical ships, 1 in the southern hemisphere, 2 in the north. They attack with green flame that turns everything it hits into glass-like sand. The Dendi fight back with red clouds that drive the Trox back, but the red mist falls back to Earth and kills every human it touches by boiling them alive.
The defense is worse than the attack.
1/10 of Earth's population is killed in this manner.
Oh my God.
Good news, though. One of the Trox ships is destroyed. Yay!
Oh, good.
And the others retreat to the asteroid belt. The Dendi offer their sympathies to the humans, but that's it.
We're so sorry. Thoughts and prayers, guys.
Thoughts and prayers.
Soon, the Trox attack again.
But this time, their green flame weapon has turned into a darker blue shade of green, and this works on the Dendi defenses and kills them.
The call for retreat was evidently sounded. The survivors fought their way to the tremendous ship in which they had come. With an explosion from her stern jets that blasted a red-hot furrow southward through France and kicked Marseille into the Mediterranean, the ship roared into space and fled home. Just their retreat destroys part of Europe.
Yep. Humanity is ready for the new evil overlords to take over, but it turns out that they're not as evil as the Dendi were making them out to be.
The Dendi were right about one thing. They are worm-like creatures with tiny segmented bodies held off the ground by complex harnesses supported by long, slender metal crutches. That much is true.
They capture a few humans and take them in some newly constructed domes. They aren't tortured or killed, but taught how to speak the Trox language. And it ain't easy, because the Trox are blind and their ships are totally dark inside. This kind of drives some of the humans insane, but enough are able to learn the language and communicate with humanity, revealing that the Trox are the true liberators.
Oh.
With human interpreters, we get the Trox side of the story. The Dendi are not part of the Galactic Federation. They are the sole rulers, kind of like an empire, it seems. Most species accept this rule, but there has been resistance from the protoplasm-based life forms known as the Protoplasmic League.
Mm-hmm.
They seek a democratic government controlled not by the silicon-based life forms, like the Dendi, but by carbon-based life forms, like humans and the Trox. The Trox are the power behind the protoplasmic forces and are fighting against their oppressors. The Dendi use this fight for propaganda to get allies on their side.
I love how they align with humans on the factor of being carbon-based. We look nothing alike, but we're carbon-based. There's always a way to say that we are alike and they are different. You can always find some factor and exploit that.
The Trox think that the humans should have figured out that the Dendi were the bad guys due to their silicon-based forms and inability to live in Earth's atmosphere without spacesuits.
Yeah.
Humans in general are forgiven for this mistake, but the leaders are deemed collaborators.
Yep, those leaders will have to be executed.
After a week of trials, the Trox execute UN officials, world leaders, and the old interpreters. Humanity is liberated and celebrations ensue.
Those linguists who cracked the code and communicated with our first contact with aliens get executed for it. Because they, for no reason, God.
Unlike the Dendi, the Trox welcome humanity's aid.
Oh, good.
So much so, humans are put to work. Hard work in conditions that are very dangerous and cause humans to die by the thousands in this war effort. This was due to exposure to alien technology, deep mining, and accidents in undersea drilling.
Truly, even in the midst of a complete economic paralysis caused by the concentration of all major productive facilities on otherworldly armaments, and despite the anguished cries of those suffering from peculiar industrial injuries, which our medical men were totally unequipped to handle, in the midst of all this mind-racking disorganization, it was yet very exhilarating to realize that we had taken our lawful place in the future government of the galaxy, and were even now helping to make the universe safe for democracy.
But of course, the Dendi return, and they launch a horrible attack on the Trox. Some Trox are killed, some flee, and others hunker down in Australia. The planet is now a war zone.
Seas boiled, whole steppes burned away. The climate itself shifted and changed under the grueling pressure of the cataclysm. By the time the Dendi solved the problem, the planet Venus had been blasted from the skies in the course of a complicated battle maneuver, and Earth had wobbled over as orbital substitute.
Eventually, the Trox are defeated and humanity is again liberated from their oppressors.
This occurred on the 24th of June, the holy day of first reliberation.
Reliberation.
First reliberation gives you some information.
Humans are told off again. You sided with the Trox because you shared a chemical basis? Come on! Dendi and humans are both vertebrates. Obviously, we're more similar than they are. So, yeah, stupid humans.
Traitors.
The promise of galactic democracy by the Trox was a lie. Look at what they did to the Earth, and they did cause a lot of problems.
Yeah.
Humans were excused for their ignorance again, but the leaders are executed for being collaborators.
Probably those translators that didn't go insane. They made it out of those ships without losing their minds, and then they get executed.
I feel like there's a cycle going on here.
Yeah, possibly.
Things calmed down for 18 months, but the Trox are back again. Another reliberation. But there are few humans left now, and almost none want anything to do with either the Dendi or the Trox. Earth is so messed up that it's become pear-shaped due to the devastation of the planet. The actual physical structure of the Earth has changed.
Yeah.
on a planetary scale. It's so unstable now that eventually the Dendi and the Trox deem it too dangerous for them, and they both abandon the planet.
That was 9 generations ago. But the tale that has been handed down from parent to child's child, has lost little in the telling. You hear it now from me almost exactly as I heard it. From my father, I heard it as I ran with him from water puddle to distant water puddle, across the searing heat of yellow sand. From my mother, I heard it as we sucked air and frantically grabbed at clusters of thick green weed, whenever the planet beneath us quivered in omen of a geological spasm that might bury us in its burned-out body, or a cosmic gyration that threatened to fling us into empty space. Yes, even as we do now, did we do then, telling the same tale, running the same frantic race across miles of unendurable heat for food and water, fighting the same savage battles with the giant rabbits for each other's carrion. And always, ever and always, sucking desperately at the precious air which leaves our world in greater quantities with every mad twist of its orbit. Naked, hungry, and thirsty came we into the world, and naked, hungry, and thirsty do we scamper our lives out upon it, under the huge and never-changing sun. The same tale it is, and the same traditional ending it has as that I had from my father and his father before him. Suck air, grab clusters, and hear the last holy observation of our history. Looking about us, we can say with pardonable pride that we have been about as thoroughly liberated as it is possible for a race and a planet to be.
Oh,
That's the end.
yeah.
Talk about monsters right at the end. Giant rabbits.
I know.
We haven't had those on the show before, even though we've brought up Night of the Lepus a few times. That film about giant rabbits. Finally. Giant rabbits.
Dreams do come true.
So this story is a pretty clear parallel to the Korean War. If folks aren't familiar with that, after World War II, the Korean Peninsula was divided into North and South, with each side occupied by one of those spheres of influence I talked about before. You had the Western powers who had South Korea, communist powers had North Korea. Each side invaded and took over the other in a cycle.
Yeah.
Until the DMZ was established, but you had a UN peacekeeping force that came in, you had Soviet forces that came in. None of this is over, even now.
No.
We're still dealing with proxy wars on the Korean Peninsula as well as all over the world.
I think the story does more than just satirize proxy wars, but like all war. Because
Yes.
most people don't actually benefit in their day-to-day lives from war. Maybe there's a slight advantage if one side wins, but the cost of war almost always outweighs the gains that you're going to get from it. Think of it as if you're just a farmer growing crops, you pay your taxes. War means that you're going to pay more taxes, and you might actually have to give up a kid or two to fight in this war. And no matter how the war ends, you're still going to be paying taxes. Maybe a little more, maybe a little less, but what difference does that make if your kids are dead or your land has been destroyed? War is bad, and we see this, like that's the Earth in this story.
Mm-hmm.
These forces that are fighting humanity, it's so sad because they have no choice in this. It's not like they could fight against these guys.
No, there's nothing like that they can do. I mean, they just vanish into nothingness if they even touch the technology that the Dendi have.
And that's typical in wars. Those people that live in those war zones, or the Vietnam War, that happened the same thing as a proxy war. Those people that lived there got no say in it. And if you pick a side, you're screwed either way.
Right.
And if you don't pick a side, you're screwed either way.
It's poor people going off to fight rich people's wars that are being conducted for reasons that are incomprehensible to us. Not because there's some complicated or interesting reasons, but just because we're not privy to them.
Yeah.
And I think that this is a funny story that very blatantly satirizes that. It's not hard to figure out what it's talking about, but it also has cosmic horror, real cosmic horror in it. Because the plight of the people here really, that's all of our plights. Even if we're not in the middle of a war, we're still, most of us, let's be honest, peasants, maybe not economically, but you don't have a choice over what really happens around you, just as you're talking about.
No.
Things just kind of affect you.
It's It's sad. Yeah, and I hear a lot of people complaining about the state of the world and calling for revolution, but revolutions generally are really bad.
Mm-hmm.
You think, oh, we're going to stop being oppressed, but what that revolution does is it causes the whole structure to break down. Chaos ensues, and then whoever's crazy enough or strong enough to take over does. And I mean, if you look at the French Revolution, that ended in a mob rule that just people were getting killed willy-nilly. So if they thought you sided with the aristocracy, then you got killed. And who's deciding that? The mob's deciding that.
Right. And the leaders keep getting killed over and over, just like in this story. The leaders of the last revolutionary wave.
Exactly. And then that actually led the way to Napoleon because he was a strong leader that killed people that were against him. And people go, oh, that guy knows what he's doing. And the same thing in the Soviet Revolution, where it was all about workers' rights, but they replaced this aristocracy with a brutal dictatorship under Stalin.
This is an unpopular opinion. I think the French should have kept Napoleon to the modern day. Just left him in place. If Napoleon were still ruling France, we wouldn't have a lot of these problems we have today.
Yeah. Interesting.
Not true. Not true. I see your point.
And the chaos of all of these things.
You're talking about violent revolutions.
Violent revolution, yes.
Things change over time. There's evolution. I think this is how some world leaders justify the enormous human cost of the things that they do. Is they say in 100 years, things will be better for people, or I'm starting something that's going to benefit folks down the line. But they don't know that for sure.
No.
At all. And so I wondered, was it necessary, say, for France to change from being a monarchy to a Western democracy? Did the revolution work, but it took 100 years?
Yeah.
Or would that have just happened anyway?
Yeah, I don't. There are other countries that didn't have violent revolutions that have made it to pretty much the same democratic spot that France did. But then again, maybe France's revolution put everybody else oh, we better be careful, all the aristocracy and wealthy, powerful people on guard.
Yeah.
Go, we don't want to face the guillotine, so let's start giving people more power and let's give democracy a try.
Did it sufficiently scare the upper class to cause some of this change to happen? I don't know. And
I don't know. I'm not a historian.
Even if you're a historian, you really can't say unless you have access to multiple worlds.
Right.
To really see what happened. The thing in this story that also was really fun, I thought, but also sad, was the way that the aliens were always involving the people through propaganda in their efforts.
Yeah.
And that's the whole joke of him saying, at least we're free, but at least we've been liberated. Those fools who had control over their own lives before the aliens showed up, they didn't know the freedom that we feel here running around drinking puddle water. But the fact that each liberating party that comes in says, you're part of this.
Yeah.
You guys are part of this important thing that's going on.
Yeah.
And by just acceding to our demands, you are helping so much.
And you're helping yourself.
You're helping yourself, and you're helping people you don't even know far away against these bad guys. And it's just that's 9/10 of the media is trying to make you feel like by paying attention, you're somehow doing something heroic or taking control of things that are ultimately completely out of your control. That convincing folks that they can control things that they can't is so key to this kind of occupation and domination. And I thought that was done so well in this story.
Whew. Some monstrous alien monsters in this story.
Yes. So are they really monsters? I say yes. The monsters in here, the giant rabbits, are maybe the only monsters in here who are just straight up weird.
Sure.
But the other monsters, the bug monsters and the 25-foot tall, because the Dendi are really tall, right? They're 25, they're giants. They are outwardly monsters, but also their carelessness with the people that they're stealing from, that they're occupying. That's really monstrous on the inside too, right? Those are monstrous actions.
Yeah.
So they're monsters in all ways, not just because they're off, because they're weird looking.
Yeah.
Right? You agree?
I agree wholeheartedly. Yep.
Okay. So this is truly a monster story for Monster May. And I think it's also a great science fiction story, which is fun to come back around to after all of that. Aikman, which I love, but is very dense. Yeah. This was really clear.
Yes.
I didn't have to guess at what anything meant in this one.
No.
Not at all. Well, we're going to be back with more things like that. We found some pulp stories called The Damp Man.
I have yet to read these yet. I'm reading them. You picked them.
Yeah.
But you're excited. And when you get excited, I get excited.
Yeah, I hope you like them. You might not. This is dangerous territory we're messing with here. This is like a kingpin kind of character who's also like a weird stalker. I do think he's truly monstrous.
Ooh.
But we'll get more into more of that next time.
I want to thank our reader again, George Woodruff. Please go check out Full Throttle Sound. He'll help you out with narration, dubbing, whatever you need.
We'll link out in the show notes. Thank you, George. I also want to thank our stakers who make these free shows possible. And I'm going to start by thanking Bag of Weasels.
The king of all snakes, thank you.
Jay Robinson, thank you so much.
Alistair Brooks, thank you.
Shmail Khan, thank you.
Christopher Rosser, thank you.
Thank you, Jared Brown.
It's a Ghost, thank you.
Thank you, John Morgan.
I'd like to thank Angelina Brown.
Eric S. Vallone, MD, thank you so much.
The illustrious Richard Wolf, thank you.
And finally, thank you, Ben A. We'll be back next time with more strange stories. For now, I'm Chad Pfeiffer.
I'm Chris Lackey, and you've been listening to Strange Studies of Strange Stories.
Exclusively on, well, not exclusively, all over the place. It's free. This was a free show. Enjoy it. We'll be back next time. Bye.
Strange Studies of Strange Stories.